Hello, everyone. I'm Judy Howard with ARC's Customer Experience and Operations team. And along with me this morning, I have Cornelius Hadding and Doug Nass, who are in our Revenue Integrity section of ARC. And we have an exciting webinar lined up for you today, Fighting Fraud Through Collaboration. After today's webinar, our goal is that you'll walk away with these different learnings and have a greater knowledge and what is an issuer-merchant collaboration and why do we need it to fight fraud? What you need to know about friendly fraud, what can be done about genuine fraud, and an insider look at South African Airlines experiences fighting fraud. I'm excited to introduce, we have two fraud and payments industry expert. First, I'm going to introduce Stefan Bishop. He's the European and Middle East Africa Regional Director of Ethoca, which is the leading global provider of collaboration-based technology that enables card issuers and online merchants, including airlines and travel agencies, to work together to stop fraud and accept transactions and increase revenue. Stefan heads up Ethoca's issuer, merchant, and partner relations across Europe, the Middle East and Africa, and works with many leading airlines and online travel agents in this region. And also joining Stefan here today, I'm really excited to have as well Tonya Robertson. She is the Director and Sales Manager for South African Airways, and which is the national flag carrier and largest airline in South Africa. She has 18+ years of experience in credit card fraud prevention, and she currently oversees fraud and chargeback related issues within Europe. Tonya is also an active participant in European Airlines Fraud Prevention Group and Airline Global Action Days coordinated by Europol. So before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping issues. Everyone's going to be muted during this call, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions throughout this whole session. Just go to the control panel on the right-hand side, type in your questions, and we're going to ask these intermittently throughout the presentation this morning. So without further ado, Stefan, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I encourage everyone, once again, ask your questions. We have these experts on the phone, and Doug and Cornelius may jump in as well from the ARC side. So Stefan, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Judith. So howdy y'all from London. I'm just going to do a quick introduction here, and yeah, it does give me great pleasure to join and host this webinar with Tonya, a real industry expert. We're both from obviously from the European and the African region, but I think the topics we're going to be talking about are absolutely applicable to all the US airlines that I see on the call today. So I'm very pleased to have you guys with us. You know, so what problem is it that we're really trying to solve through collaboration? Well, actually, both merchants and issuers all around the world have very strong fraud management systems, but they really don't have a way to break those fraud management systems outside of their internal environments in the airlines, in the travel agents, or at the issuing banks, to actually share data with each other. Why would we need to share data? Well, you know, if we don't share data together with each other to solve the problems that exist in the industry around fraud, then we have a lot of fraud and chargeback losses financially impacting our businesses. We have a lot of declines that impact us, which impact customer experience. That all adds up to a lot of cost and revenue impacts, but most importantly also customer experience problems. So these are the problems we're trying to solve. They're material problems for the industry. An interesting way of looking at things is, you know, when an issuer sees fraud, 58% of the time, actually, the merchant has got no idea that the issuer has already stopped the transaction. So that's a lot of data and a lot of intelligence that is missing in a merchant's data set that Ethoca can help plug. Equally, 19% of the time, when orders are investigated, the issuer actually doesn't even know that the merchant has identified the fraud. So, you know, on both sides of the equation, there's a lot of data that's missing, and that's the gap, I guess, that gets plugged when issuers and merchants start to collaborate with each other globally. So that's really, you know, Ethoca is a collaboration platform to share in real-time data between, on the left hand there, issuing banks, and on the right hand there, airlines. We're going to talk today a bit about friendly fraud. So there's many different terms that are used in the industry to describe this topic. Friendly fraud is one that some people love to use, but other people who are fraud experts actually really hate using the term, because they'll say things like, it's never friendly if it's fraud, it's a criminal act. Other terms that we often hear used in the industry to describe this phenomena are first-party fraud. So that's really where the first party is the card holder, the customer, are actually the ones committing the fraudulent act. It could be family fraud, for just false claims, people claiming things as fraud when they're truly not fraud. Or another term that's also used quite a bit in the more typically in retail is cyber shoplifting. I don't know if you've heard any of those terms, but let's just have a quick look at the kind of things that are referred to when we talk about this friendly fraud topic. So it's where a fraud is committed when an individual, the customer really, has knowledge or was complicit and or somehow benefited from the transaction on their own account, albeit that they reported the transaction as unauthorized or fraudulent. A few statistics for you here. This phenomena is growing globally. It'll be interesting at the end to talk about your experiences, but we see about 7 to 15% jump in the last year of friendly fraud being an issue. 37% of merchants feel unprepared to combat it. They lack information. This is from WorldPay, and 46% of merchants say that it's really damaging their revenues. So it's just a few industry statistics. I think this one is really, really interesting though. Here you see the jump in the friendly fraud rates by industry. So friendly fraud historically, if you look in the middle there, has been the domain of digital goods providers. These would be companies like, for example, Apple iTunes or Google Play or Sony PlayStation, Uber, these type of companies. But whilst that's grown a little bit in the last couple of years, what you can see on this slide here is that travel has jumped dramatically from 6 to 39% of merchants reporting it as an issue. Physical goods also, surprisingly, particularly in the fashion and retail industries, have seen an incredible jump. So I think what we've seen is cardholders have taken their experience from digital goods and then translated that across to the travel or the physical retail good environments. So what we're basically seeing is that friendly fraud rates are jumping. It's becoming a real industry problem that needs to be solved. I'm going to click on now. So there's really four, sorry for the busyness of the slide, but what I just wanted to highlight from this PowerPoint, and we can share these PowerPoints after the webinar, but there's really four key things typically that are going on, whether it's travel or digital goods or physical retail, that result in customers raising these false claims of friendly fraud. The first is where a merchant's descriptor is not clear on the customer's card statement, and that results in the customer being confused and not recalling at all the transaction they made and calling their bank or raising the dispute perhaps in a digital environment. Increasingly, I think we'll see this phenomena occur. Because they don't recognize the descriptor, the statement, the name of the merchant on their statement. The next one would be the topic that we referred to previously as family fraud. This is one where nowadays many customers have have accounts set up on their computers, their iPads, their Android devices, and so on. And this is where, maybe it's a child, or maybe it's a spouse, or maybe it's a parent, another family member is using the account and booking a charge to a credit card that the customer who owns the credit card doesn't recognize, and then phones their bank and raises the claim of fraud. The third one then starts to get a bit more malicious now as we go towards the right. This is where what's often called buyer's remorse, that the customer has maybe made an expensive holiday booking on a Saturday night in a frenzy of wild excitement, and then on the Sunday has got remorse that they really shouldn't have made that booking, and they want to claim it as an unauthorized transaction perhaps the next week. Or the fourth area, which is really the extremely malicious one, gaming the system. This is where customers are maliciously leveraging the chargeback rights that they have, the consumer protection laws that may exist in each country around the world, to claim to their issuer that it wasn't them when absolutely it was them, but they've already flown, for example, on the airline. So these are the type of scenarios we're trying to fix through collaboration. this friendly fraud epidemic has a number of negative experiences for the card holder, for the airline, and for the issuer. I'm not going to go into those in too much detail because I really want to hear what Tonya's going to say about all of this. So what I would like to do, though, is just confirm that, you know, some specific travel industry examples of friendly fraud that occur might be things, for example, like customers getting additional charges beyond just the airline ticket that they disagree with, or they claim they didn't know about, and claiming that is fraud or unauthorized to their issuer. They might just not recognize it, as we discussed before. It might be the name of the merchant, but it might just be that they can't remember what it was they bought. It might be that they had some serious service issues. It might be more of a dispute, but they're claiming it as fraud instead of just saying, I have a quality or a service issue with the airline ticket that I bought. They could actually be shopping under the influence of alcohol or heavy buyer's remorse. These are the type of examples that we're seeing in the travel industry that lead to false claims of friendly fraud or family fraud. Just one thing before I hand over to Tonya to give an airline perspective on all this is there are some other downstream impacts of all of this stuff. So, if you actually have good transactions being incorrectly or falsely coded as fraud, what happens next is the fraud tools, both at your airlines but also at the issuers, get tuned incorrectly, and they start to then make wrong decisions. That then leads them to more transactions being declined, both by the merchant or the issuer, and obviously that then results in good customers being turned away, which impacts revenues, which impacts customer experience, as we said at the start. So there's a number of negative aspects to this phenomena, and that's really my introduction to the topic. I'd like to hand you over to Tonya, who's just going to talk about her perspective of this, being responsible for this area for a leading global airline.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Well, Stefan's given us some really great insights into travel-based friendly fraud disputes, but I'm just going to share with you some real examples of the main types of friendly fraud that we've been exposed to, and maybe more importantly, how we deal with it as well. Before I get into them, it's important to note that while geographically some regions have fraud trends which are unique to their markets, I think airline customers share many similarities. And whilst these examples may be from another geographical region to you, I'm sure you'll notice that many of the trends are the same. So the kind of friendly fraud that we have experienced is buyer's remorse. Stefan did speak about this, but it's a slightly less common reason that we receive these disputes, but we do get it from time to time, and it's often customers have had an expensive holiday, perhaps it wasn't quite up to their expectation, and sometimes they do try to get the cost of their flights or upgrades refunded. So a lot of the time it's additional services which they are trying to get refunded. I've had situations where I've contacted customers to discuss their dispute, and they're genuinely surprised by the amount of data that we hold, and therefore they can be quite easily persuaded or talked out of taking the chargeback route, especially if we make it clear that we are going to defend our position. We normally tend to make contact with customers when we suspect that it may be a friendly fraud scenario, and obviously that correspondence can be documented, and it can be used as evidence if they do decide to go through with the chargeback. It's very interesting because customers have become quite good at researching with airlines or merchants what data they actually hold on them before they go ahead and do the chargeback. They're obviously relying on the fact that merchants and the issuers in this case don't really collaborate, or don't have the ability to collaborate as much as they think that we don't. Service not provided is a much more common reason for friendly fraud. Often customers who've been prevented from traveling for some reason, be it incomplete travel documentation, they've got an expired passport, an incorrect visa, in these instances, obviously, we can rely on our conditions of carriage as evidence, but you are relying on the issuers to understand the complex immigration requirements required for travel, and often it's a lot easier for the issuer to rule in favor of their customer, because that's also where the loyalty lies to them. Defective service is an area we see as well. If a customer feels that all the amenities are not as they expected, perhaps the in-flight entertainment wasn't working, or they have crew or service complaints, they do often try and charge back the full amount of the flight to compensate for the experience they've had. I have actually seen emails where some consumer advice organizations have encouraged customers to take the chargeback route over sending an email of complaint to the airline and trying to sort it out that way. And disagreement with refund rules is by far our most common reason for chargebacks or disputes. When a customer is not satisfied with the amount that they get refunded, which obviously often includes cancellation fees, when they cancel a reservation, they will often go through to the issuer and request the full amount back through the bank. A lot of evidence is required to dispute these kind of transactions from our side, and it makes it especially difficult for airlines if the reservations have been made over the telephone as opposed to online. So just moving on to the next slide. Stefan, if you could just move, yeah, the challenges that we face is obviously the financial impact is number one. These are often very high value transactions, averaging at about $1,000 US per transaction. So it's not an insignificant amount, especially in the airline industry where margins are really slim. And friendly fraud can be very difficult to dispute, especially when the name on the card differs from that of the customer, can be what we call sponsored payments. This can also be a little bit more organized kind of friendly fraud, and also moving, as Stefan was speaking to earlier, towards the more malicious end of the scale. So they will use the sponsored payment method as a way to exploit the system. So get a friend with a different name or surname to pay for the tickets or group of tickets, and then obviously get them to dispute the transaction as unauthorized. It's sometimes done even without the actual passenger's knowledge. I have one that's ongoing at the moment. We have a passenger who claims he knows the cardholder. He purchased tickets for him, but the transaction has since been disputed as fraud. So in this case, we would obviously make contact with the passenger whose details we have and advise him to open a case against the person who's purchased the tickets for him. Friendly fraud, which is committed with reasonable intent, is something that we don't condone. We cannot condone it. And I think what's especially important to the airline industry is this kind of dishonesty can be carried out into other areas of the business as well and expose you to more risk. There are onboard purchases which can be disputed. There is fraud that can occur with regards to false lost and damaged baggage claims. So I think the risk with our kind of business is far too high, and ultimately these aren't really the customers that we want. It's very time consuming and labor intensive to compile defenses when there are disputes. It's not only investigating, it's getting all the different data and evidence from various departments within the company. And what is also a challenge is the balance between making it easy to transact for the customer and protecting yourself as a merchant. So obviously, in order to make sales, we want to make it as easy as possible for customers to transact, but we still need to ensure that we have sufficient evidence to dispute a chargeback if one should arise. When it comes to providing evidence, you need to be very familiar with representment requirements and how they differ by card association and chargeback type, as well as the best way to present your supporting evidence, because that can win or lose your case. Yeah, I think when it comes to the consequences that we impose, we take quite a hard line approach when it comes to friendly fraud. As I said, these aren't the customers that we want, and it's important in the travel space to keep that in mind, that friendly fraud shouldn't be ignored or brushed off as a cost of doing business. it's really only going to exacerbate the problem, not only for yourself, but for all merchants. And gaming the system is, when it comes to chargebacks, can spread to other areas, as I've mentioned, of the business very, very quickly. The customers rely on the fact that we don't collaborate, or they think that we don't collaborate. And this is where it's really, really important to get those alerts coming through, and to get alerted to the disputes before they actually come through as a chargeback. So in terms of consequences, and that's my next slide, it's depending on ticket value, and we will take that claim to a small claims court. We will suspend a frequent flyer account if there is one associated with the customer, and customers do get placed on a negative list for future travel if they haven't settled their accounts with us, or if we believe that they filed a chargeback and it was not valid. And I think if you educate your customers in this kind of way, then you will have less and less of this kind of fraud moving forward.
Thank you very much indeed, Tonya. Much more interesting than my green slides. I much prefer the colours on yours as well, by the way. Very, very, very nice. So, okay, so I mean, what is this solution that Tonya is starting to talk about there? Well, this is the what in the industry we call the Ethoca Eliminator solution. But if we just imagine here a scenario where a customer on the left-hand side there is claiming that they've got a transaction with South African Airways, in this instance is fraud. What would happen is the customer, this solution really delivers information around the booking into a number of different channels to the bank. Firstly, nowadays most people are accessing their billing transactions with their bank through internet or mobile banking apps. Increasingly also quite a phenomenon, not just in the US but globally now, is chat channels within the app or the online banking channel being used, instead of just seeing a transaction information, actually opening up an online chat to raise some queries like, I don't recognize this transaction, what was that, this wasn't me, I think this is fraud. Or still the most prevalent one today absolutely is calling here in the bottom image there, the issuer agent. So customers calling up and saying, hey, this wasn't me, this is fraud, even though it was actually a valid booking with South African Airways that Tonya is going to defend vigorously. So basically, the customer would click on the transaction in their internet or mobile banking app, or contact the issuer to inquire about the transaction. What happens then is that this transaction gets routed to Ethoca. We then go and pull in the bottom right-hand corner there, step 2, we retrieve in-depth transactional details back from the merchant, the airline, and we immediately present it back to the cardholder or the appropriate issuer channel. And what that enables the issuer to do is to actually constructively challenge the customer using real data points, the kind of data points that Tonya would use later, much further down the process in a very expensive manner, to defend the chargeback and fight the false claim. But actually what we're doing here is we're doing it right at the front end of the process, and it's driven through automation. So if for example, I know we've got airlines on the phone today, but if you're actually a US travel agent, ARC can actually help enable this capability with Ethoca for you. So if you're an airline, if you work, for example, with a Certify is certainly the world leading fraud platform used by many of the world's biggest airlines. If any of you on the phone today do use a Certify, and you're interested to take advantage of this latest innovation, it's really going to change the industry over the next 5 years, we believe, then actually a Certify can do all of the technology heavy lift for you, and Ethoca will be very pleased to help you achieve that outcome. Let's just have a look on the next slide, though, around what would a real life example of this look like. This is an example, instead of South African Airways, it's an Air Canada example, as you can see. So this is the customer's phoned into the call center of, let's say, US Bank. the customer, Jeremy Smith, has said, hey, there's this charge here for 2,417 Canadian. It wasn't me. This is unauthorized. This is fraud. And what by retrieving the transaction information using the ARN, the acquirer reference number, a unique transaction reference, what it enables the call center agent to do is to constructively challenge Jeremy Smith here and say, hey, listen, Jeremy, I've actually retrieved the transaction from Air Canada here, and I can see that this transaction is in relation to a flight from Vancouver to London, a return. I can see actually that there was a layover in Toronto down there on the bottom left-hand side. I've got the times. Do you remember this flight? It was actually in seat 8A. It was a business class flight. I can see also that actually the IP address used to make this purchase with Air Canada is actually there. You can see in the middle of the screen, slightly to the right. And for example, I've checked that against your credit card statement. Actually, that's the same IP address, Jeremy. And I can see that the device name, this was bought on Jeremy's Mac. Have you got an Apple Mac that you use to book flights? What you can see here is that you can see there's an e-ticket delivery details down the bottom. There's very rich transactional information here, the kind of information that Tonya's just been talking about that she would use to fight a chargeback further down the line at vast expense. But what we're doing is we're automating the provision of this data to the issuer right at the front end of the process to deflect this false claim, to deflect this claim of friendly fraud. That's the latest Ethoca collaboration solution, which is called Ethoca Eliminator. As I said, we are now building out some platform partnerships with market-leading companies like ARC and also Certify. Others will follow. We can also do these integrations with merchants directly. And really, it's all about solving for descriptor confusion, solving for those questions of household claims, maybe if the order was made by a parent, a spouse, a partner, a child, that sort of thing. In the case where buyer's remorse, where the customer's claiming it wasn't them, and they don't, this will help fight it. And again, gaming the system, this will eradicate that. Particularly as using the example I've just shown you there with all those data points, the issuer can really push back hard on the customer to challenge the false claim. Okay, so that really closes the section on friendly fraud. Happy to take any questions now or indeed later, Judith. I'm going to move on to...
Okay, Stefan, we're going to just take a step back. Cornelius did have one that came in regards to...
Yeah, Tonya, you mentioned that the customers are normally advised to file, to raise a chargeback instead of filing a complaint directly with the airline. Why is that? Is that just process is so cumbersome? Is there something the airlines can do to improve that environment? Is there anything else that could be done in that space?
Well, these are actually consumer advice organizations which are encouraging customers to do this. And I've actually seen some of the email examples from the organizations. And I think the reason why they're telling customers to do that is because the assumption is that the chargeback route is often a lot quicker and easier to go down, rather than to file a complaint with an airline, wait for a response that might not be in your favor, whereas a lot of the time you will just get an immediate refund from the bank if you do raise a dispute. So I think in that respect, there's not that much that airlines can do, apart from perhaps making their communication channels a lot easier for customers. But I think I do think there is some blame on obviously the consumer advice organizations to be to be saying that is the method to do things. Right. Yeah, that should not go unchallenged. But I think it's just the ease of taking that route.
Yeah, and so, I mean, with that in mind, now with Stephen, you introduced this Eliminator tool. Do you think this is something that would give you a little bit more, power to tackle this head on before it even becomes a fight that you have to do to dispute that chargeback? Is this something you see value in, or? Is there something that would sort of replace that consumer complaint because you can tackle it earlier?
Well, I mean, in the first instance, I guess really, you know, some of these examples that we've talked about are actually just customers not recognizing it, whether it's because of, you know, unclear transaction statement records, or whether it's because they've forgotten or their family member made the purchase on their card and it was a valid purchase. So some of them will be solved by the customer, you know, being able to click on the transaction in their app and pulling up these kind of information points, and then going, oh yeah, that was me, or that was my parents, my partner, my children, what have you. In the case of, if we just sort of flip onto that next one, in the case of those items 3 and 4, where really the customer is really behaving badly, maliciously, that they, you know, what we've seen from our experience in digital goods and implementing this solution in with a few of the world's leading digital goods companies, those customers still phone the bank and still try it on. But that's the point at which the bank then, when we arm the call center agent with the information, can really fight in a constructive, supportive way, obviously a customer-focused way, but really challenge that customer and deflect the false claim. So we are, you know, this solution is live in the digital goods industry. We are seeing the benefits of it. It's, you know, it's proven already to be working. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Stefan. That's all we have here for now, but please, everyone, keep typing in your questions. Those are good ones. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for the question. So I'm going to now go on and talk not so much about this new phenomenon of friendly fraud, which is really increasingly impacting the travel industry, but just go back to the world of genuine fraud, which we have been dealing with for the past decade and more. So, you know, obviously genuine fraud refers to fraud that is knowingly committed by criminal individuals or groups of criminal individuals for the purpose of illegally acquiring flight, in the case of this, you know, flights or air miles or whatever it may be. So, you know, I think just some industry statistics. We all know that fraud is a big problem. It's definitely a big problem in the US, bigger than most markets in the world. For the US, even the genuine fraud, friendly fraud is definitely the biggest in the US globally, but fraud is also very, very substantial in the US. So, you know, the first Juniper example there is 48 billion. It's, you know, it's more than doubled in, it's forecast to more than double in the next 5 years. It's costing on average of 8% of annual revenues when you actually consider all of the costs that are associated with a fraudulent transaction. Again, IATA Group is forecasting that it's going to jump from 4.4 to 6.4. I guess that's, you know, on track with the first bullet point there, that it's growing. It's going to roughly double in the next 5 years, and that overall, totally globally, it's amounting to about 0.53% of e-commerce sales are associated with fraud. That's, I mean, these are really incredibly high numbers, higher in the US than anywhere else in the world, as I said. So, you know, how does the very, very proven model of collaboration help to fight fraud? Well, you know, what Ethoca does, it's a very simple business model. We are connecting in real time issuers and merchants to help them both fight fraud. That's what we do. So, you know, when the issuer identifies a case of fraud, or the cardholder phones the issuer and identifies a case of genuine fraud, step one there, the issuer notifies Ethoca of that immediately. Ethoca then in real time transmits an Ethoca alert to the merchant. Step 3, the merchant then stops the fulfillment. I guess, you know, by that what we mean is suspend the ticket or cancel the ticket, suspend the account or cancel the account. And, you know, that's the purpose of doing that is, of course, to stop the criminal activity, but also to avoid the chargeback, which, you know, is going to be coming. That's the next step in all this. And then Ethoca will transmit back to the issuer the outcome of the alert, which hopefully is stop fraud and hopefully is, you know, transaction refunded or transaction not settled even. Sometimes we get the data to merchants so quickly that it's not even settled yet. It's still at an authorization stage. So basically, we are a real-time collaboration network sharing data between issuers and merchants to stop genuine fraud in this scenario. Okay, so, you know, hopefully it's pretty clear, but by sharing the intelligence about these fraudulent orders, issuers and merchants can have much deeper insights and stop more fraud. What we mean by deeper insights is, is actually use that data not just for that individual transaction, but upload the information to your fraud models so that you can make much better decisions in the future about that customer and anything to do with that customer account who's made that order. It's not just about stopping this transaction, it's also about stopping future fraud as well. Merchant, nobody wants to have criminals on their airplanes, we have many examples. Actually, Tonya will hopefully talk about a couple, but we have many examples of stopping really serious criminal activity through this Ethoca alert service with airlines globally. It also then, of course, enables you to resell the ticket if you manage to suspend it and stop the criminal activity and stop the flight. It enables you to resell it to legitimate customers. And really this is all about real-time data exchange. So when you're trying to stop fraud, speed is critical. Relying on getting a chargeback, which might be 4 or 6 weeks later after the event, is really a flawed model. Real-time data exchange, real-time collaboration is what the industry has defined as the best practice, and that's what the Ethoca alert solution is all about. Some true real-life case studies here. A Canadian airline, a US airline, a British airline, and a low-cost airline. These are all brands that you would all recognise the names of these companies. They're all Ethoca customers. We're proud to have them. South African is one of these customers, there's many. If you're really in doubt about the Ethoca service or the value of it, we can always put you in touch with some airline peers who can share with you their experiences. Tonya's very kindly doing that today, but there's many others who'd be willing to do that if you really wanted some extra assurances. So let's talk about some real life examples. These are much more interesting, Tonya. So I'm handing over to you again.
Okay, thanks so much, Stefan. So from the dispute perspective, criminal fraud is probably in many respects much easier to deal with than friendly fraud. Friendly fraud takes quite extensive investigation in order to determine, that it is in fact friendly fraud. With criminal fraud, it's slightly different, but the route that you take on what to do with a criminal fraud reservation is ultimately dependent on the type of notification that you receive. So I don't need to say, how severe the consequences of incorrect decision making can be when it comes to refunding or suspending a ticket if you think it is fraud when you don't have a confirmed fraud report. It can be pretty severe, costly financially, and also from a reputational perspective as well. So what a lot of airlines will do if they have a confirmed fraud report is refund the transaction or suspend the ticket. But a lot of the decisions that we make, obviously merchants are forced to make decisions on a daily basis without the same set of data that the issuers have. So sometimes when you are just suspicious of fraud, you're not going to go to the extent of rejecting, refunding or suspending the ticket. You will ask the customer for an alternative form of payment and possibly a less risky method, maybe give them the option of paying cash at one of your airport ticket desks or counters. But obviously, this is where the importance of obtaining a confirmed fraud report comes in. Really, to take drastic action and disrupt somebody's travel, you really need a confirmed fraud report prior to travel. This is where collaboration and intelligence sharing is really, really vital. The lack of consequences is also a major benefit for those people committing credit card fraud. And the main reason why airlines are usually reluctant to take any further action is due to the difficulty of getting confirmed fraud reports from the banks. There's so many times when I've wished I could just pick up the phone and double check with the bank if something is legitimate or not. But before you take that more drastic action, before you can request law enforcement presence, it's really imperative that you get a confirmed fraud report. And obviously, when an alert comes through from Ethoca, I have 100% confidence that is confirmed fraud. The other challenge is getting the reports quickly. I normally get reports within about 12 to 24 hours of a ticket being issued. So the speed of those alerts are actually really, really key for us, especially sometimes within a few hours of travel. You need to be alerted that transaction is not good. We're not able to make contact with the banks or card issuers, like I've said, and if you don't act quickly, your chances are easily lost. And it's the ease of committing fraud and the lack of consequences for the people who actually commit the criminal fraud leads to the perpetual cycle of fraud. So we do, as I've said, with friendly fraud, take a hard line. With criminal fraud, we do take an exceptionally hard line. We will offload customers. We will get law enforcement to question customers. We have had a lot of success in doing that, and in various stations globally where there is representment. Luckily, word spreads quite fast in the criminal world, and sometimes disruption is a much better outcome than a lengthy police case, which may not result in anything due to lack of evidence, jurisdiction, red tape. Nobody wants to be offloaded when they're already sitting comfortably in business class, sipping their champagne. At that stage of the journey, they really do think that they've got away with this, and it's quite satisfying when at that stage, at that late stage, perhaps even a confirmed fraud alert comes through, and you can act on that and actually remove them from the flight. The line of least resistance, this is something the fraudster will try again and again. They always try until the weakest link is found. If they manage to, if an airline manages to stop the reservation, they will try through an online travel agent. They'll try through another geolocation of the airline's website. We have had many cases where once an arrest has been made, the fraudster has been linked to many other forms of crime and often charged for more serious offences and not just the credit card fraud. We find that card fraud is not the main crime, but it's definitely a facilitator for other crimes, and it's a way to maximise revenue as well for the fraudster. The fraudster will always take the line of least resistance, and they will continuously try and find the weakest link, which is why a safety net is required. When your fraud tools don't pick up new trends, when they fail, you've always got the safety that you will get an alert on this kind of transaction. I mean, we have, I have many, many examples, but we had a customer who committed fraud on us. She unfortunately did travel, but she was reported after the event, and we opened a criminal case. She was found to be involved in many, many other forms of crime. The list of crimes that she had committed was very, very long, and the £3,000 which we had lost on that air ticket was really, really low in comparison to some of the other frauds that she had committed. And this just really helps the police to build a much bigger case against an individual as well. Also leads you to ask the question, are these really the kind of customers that you want to be carrying as well? There is risk associated with these kind of customers. Unfortunately, there are complex jurisdiction and legal issues as well when it comes to fraud. If a transaction takes place on a US website for a flight, United Kingdom to Germany, the police will often be quite hesitant to act. I've often been asked, well, where has the crime taken place? At which point has the crime taken place? Is it where the customer is departing from, or is it where the transaction was made? But confirmed fraud status is the evidence that every airline needs in order to act on their suspicions. Without that confirmed fraud report, it's very, very difficult to get any sort of action. Customers who commit criminal fraud have become very relaxed about the lack of consequences. Often they just ask to pay cash instead if fraud is picked up, and it's this lack of consequence that leads them to try again and again. There is always a chance that at least one of the transactions will be successful. Interestingly as well, with regards to the alerts that come through, I have a case where I received one Ethoca alert through some link analysis on that credit card number, passenger names, there were 36 linked bookings. So this really proves that the value of one fraud report and how many additional transactions you can actually stop just through one person reporting that as fraud, and the collaboration, the issuer then sending that on and resulting in an Ethoca alert to the merchant. So the next slide that I have is basically just an example. It's a genuine customer transaction example, but it's just to kind of illustrate the complexities that we currently face. So this booking, reservation made on a UK website, the card being used was a US card, the IP address was Belgian, and the flight was from Frankfurt to Johannesburg. This is where we start to see the benefit of having a product that facilitates sales instead of prohibiting them. So basically with a reservation like this, a lot of airlines still use rules-based systems, and we will safeguard against fraud by prohibiting these type of transactions. These are risky transactions, but at the same time, these are very common transactions. This is the way a lot of people transact these days, and we want to continue to allow these transactions to go through. Obviously, for high-risk routes, you might need stricter rules regarding card acceptance, but this is an example of a genuine transaction, and something such as this may be rejected or reviewed if you're using a tool relying on business rules. But in order to continue to accept these kind of riskier transactions, we found using an additional safeguard like the Ethica alert system is really crucial. And lastly, I just wanted to talk through the real value of a chargeback, so the real cost of a chargeback. So a chargeback comes through, and this example is really relevant to friendly fraud as well as criminal fraud. By the time it gets to a chargeback and the money is being debited from the airline's account, there are a lot of costs to consider. So obviously, you look at the value of the ticket, which will be the total chargeback that's payable. There's also an additional cost to the airline. Obviously, there's the cost of being unable to resell that seat. There are airport taxes on that ticket, taxes and charges which need to be paid to governments and authorities. And if there are other airlines, there is a prorate payable to other carriers on the ticket. You can actually look, before you've even looked at the cost of disputing a chargeback or the labor that goes into that, before you've even looked at that, you've got the true cost of your chargeback, which is at least double the value of that ticket. So it's something that really needs to be looked into, because it's not as simple as just taking the cost of that ticket and counting that as a loss. There is a lot more that goes into calculating the total cost of a chargeback. So over to you, Stefan.
Thank you so much, Tonya. That's really it, actually. I hope that you've enjoyed our accents over here. I hope that we've been clear in our communication. Thank you very much indeed for listening. We just wanted to open the floor really now for if there's any Q&A or any fraud-fighting stories that anyone on the line wanted to share.
Thank you, Stefan and Tonya. Great presentation with lots of valuable information. And I just wanted to say really thank you to you both for kind of kicking off prematurely our Fraud Awareness Month, which is coming up in September. So this was really kind of a great segue into that. I'm just going to take a minute to just share with everyone on the phone some of the other webinars that we have coming up in September, which will be our Fraud Month, and it'll be for our agent and our airline customers. And for the airlines, we have coming up on September 5th, we have our very own Doug Ness and Cornelius Hatting that will be presenting on September 5th. So look for more information to come on that. Also, we have coming up on September 12th, we'll have Perseus which will be doing a combined presentation for our airline and agent customers. And then on September 13th, we'll have our friends from Loyalty Fraud Prevention Association, and they'll be doing a presentation. So look for information on that. You can also register on our website at arccorp.com. Go to events, and these will all be there. So again, arccorp.com under events. I'm just going to see if there's some more questions. I think you all were so thorough that I think you answered probably a lot of the questions that our folks may have had that are listening on the phone today. But we'll take a few more minutes to see if anyone wants to write any questions in. Again, go to your control panel on the right-hand side, type them in. In the interim, if anyone had any questions, Stefan or Tonya, for you, is there a contact for you? Okay. If not, I do have where you can contact us.
Oh, sorry,
okay.
Sorry.
There's this generic,
yeah, there's a generic email address here at the end if anybody wants the PDF. You can obviously get us on LinkedIn, I guess is probably the best way.
Okay, great. And I also want to just reiterate for those of you on the phone, you probably know this email address and phone number, but I do just want to review it with you again. To reach our ARC folks, which can also at any time contact Stefan and Tonya, just go to, you can, the email address is stopfraud@arccorp.com. Again, stopfraud@arccorp.com. Also, our fraud team can be reached at 855-358-0393. I'm going to repeat that because this is really important, 855-358-0393. And on their arccorp.com website, if you just go to the search box and type in fraud prevention, you'll get our fraud page and all the information that you could want. There's white papers, there's the most recent trends, there's things to look out for. So just always know that that resource is there. Many of you have probably visited it, but just again, always contact us if you have any inkling that there might be fraud involved, and our team will get back to you. And I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions that have come in. Okay, let's see. This one is, let's see, we do have a few here. And this one was, I'm a victim of a chargeback. Whom should I contact to get help? I just provided some of that information. So again, contact our fraud team here at ARC, and they'll be able to direct you to the right resource. So just contact us here. And will this work for the rail industry? If there's fraud, Cornelius, I'm looking to you.
I mean, I suppose the question is more directed to Ethoca's solutions. There is one. I'm not sure if you can just type back in and confirm that that's the case. Otherwise, yeah, I think, Stephen, just maybe you can answer to say if this is for Ethoca's solution. Yeah. If it's applicable to rail as well. I suppose it's for all merchants, as you mentioned, but you just validate. Yeah,
we have many rail customers using the service over here in Europe as well that I'm personally aware of. It's really all major industries operating in the card not present or e-commerce space.
Okay, great, thank you, and hope that answers the person's question from the rail industry. Thank you, and it looks like we may have a question here for our ARC folks, where they're asking, they're a small business owner, how to fight to get our money back from a customer, as ARC said charge was valid and billed to travel agent already and paid by travel agent to ARC already from our pocket. Is that anything we can answer, or we'll take that offline? And
yeah, if the person asking that question, if they could provide a lot more detail about that, and send it into the stopfraud@arccorp.com, we would definitely try to see what can be done.
Great, thank you, Doug. And the one in regards to how would this integration work with the railway business, let's go back to the Ethoca contact information. That's where I would go, is the sales@ethoca.com, right there. And also you can reach out to any of us. My email, of course, is jhoward@artcorp.com, and we could get that over to our friends at Ethoca. So either way, or there's the phone number. Yeah. So how does integration work, Stephen, if you want to try to answer that, or if they want to reach out and...
Yeah, sure. I mean, integration, sorry, if we're talking about the rail example, I mean, it's really the same for any merchant. So we would start off with a very simple, low-touch form of integration for the Ethoca alert service that we talked about in the second half of the presentation, the genuine fraud solution. That really just, you'd have to contact sales@ethoca.com, and we can set you up probably within about less than a week, really. We could set you up with a secure portal, which would enable us to send you any Ethoca alerts that we receive from our issuers. We have 4,100 issuers currently all around the world, literally in every single region of the world. It's a lot of issuers. We have very extensive coverage of North American issuers as well, and that, as I say, that can be set up in about a week, and we will give you a 1-month free trial. So it's really an extremely easy process to experience the benefits of Ethoca without any financial commitments, with very simple form of agreements to sign. So that's really it. I mean, contact sales@ethoca.com. It's our job to make it easy for you to work with us. We want to work with you. And that would be the start. If you're a high volume merchant, a lot of the airlines we work with, there's so many cases of fraud or chargebacks going on that actually we perform integration projects with your fraud tools or your payment processors, such that everything is fully automated through either, well, typically we would perform an API integration. That's for the Ethoca alert service, which is for the genuine fraud. The Ethoca Eliminator solution we showcased, which used, if you remember that Air Canada example, that is a pure API-based solution. But as I did say, if you're an agent, then you can actually leverage ARC, because ARC and Ethoca are performing an integration there. That will be an interesting conversation. But obviously, airlines on the call today, as I mentioned, we can either work with you directly to perform that API integration, but a route that is very, very attractive if you use a certifier is we can leverage your certifying relationship, and that's a very light touch solution for you with really no heavy lift whatsoever from a technical project perspective. So in summary, it's very, very light touch to start working with Ethoca, and obviously then, if you've got high volume, we can go down a fully automated, fully integrated API driven solution also.
Okay, great. Okay, it looks like we don't have any other questions. Once you leave this call today and you do have questions, if you have our fraud email, of course, you can also email me, and I will reach out to either Tonya or Stefan on the phone to get answers to your questions, or of course Cornelius and Doug we have here that are our resident experts at ARC. Again, my email address is jhoward@artcorp.com, and I'd be happy to forward those emails on or get you the information that you need. But I really want to give and extend a very warm thank you to both Stefan and Tonya for a great presentation today and taking the time out of their busy schedules to spend with all of you for this webinar. And again, Cornelius and Doug, as always, are working on our side to help all of you. So thank you all, and we hope that you'll be joining us for some of our Fraud Month webinars coming up, so look for that information, and we'll give you 2 minutes back to your day-to-day. Thank you, Tonya, and thank you, Stefan.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. And thank you for all of our attendees. Have a good day.